Hi and welcome. This is Homebody Rundown and I'm HR, and this is the final week of a 6-week pantry challenge. The goal with the pantry challenge was to use more of the items I already had in the house and to focus on using up things that maybe were getting old or even sometimes past their expiration date just to see if they were still good. And I feel like I would get through some things that I had been avoiding in the pantry. I wasn't as strict with Pantry Challenge this time. I did continue to buy produce, milk, and or dairy and eggs, and that was really helpful to buy more produce because it helped me to utilize some of those things that I had been wanting to use in the pantry, but they're just not as good sometimes without a fresh component with them. So that was a really nice strategy for me this time, and I'm glad I did that. This is not a recipe channel. I like to say that every time. I tend to just cook to taste and wing it, but if there is an inspiration, recipe, or something that I am following, I will link that in the description. I am only cooking for 3 in this week, myself, my husband, and youngest child who still lives at home, and we do eat a primarily pescatarian or vegetarian diet. Starting the week with shrimp tacos, I had this package of guacamole in the refrigerator. I buy this at Sam's Club. It's a 3-pack. I think it's a really great deal price-wise, and I like that you can freeze it if you want to have it for the future. I had a little bit of lettuce that needed to get used up and red cabbage. So I shredded the lettuce so that it would be more the same size. Now, if I was thinking ahead, I should have mixed up the sauce for this in the bowl first and then added in the veggies, but this is mayonnaise, low-fat Greek yogurt, lime juice, salt, black pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, and this is Cholula hot sauce, and just mixing it the best I can with tongs. And it was a little too much sauce for this, but it tasted really good. These are shrimp that I defrosted. I buy a large bag of these from Costco, and I have had them in the freezer for a while, so I wanted to get them used up. Into this pan, I have avocado oil, lime juice, roasted garlic. I added in ancho chili powder and perhaps too much smoked paprika. I don't know what I was thinking. Anyway, garlic powder, onion powder, and black pepper. And I just want to get these some of the moisture evaporated out of these and let them get, a lot of flavor. Thankfully, I had corn tortillas still in the refrigerator and I needed to use those up. I also added on salsa and sharp cheddar cheese along with the guacamole and the cabbage slaw mix. This was really good. Groceries I picked up this week, and I forgot to film it, but I also picked up 2 half-gallons of milk. We finally ran out. We made it almost to the end. Next up is apple bread, and I think I have included this in one of the Pantry Challenge weeks, and I know I've included it in other cooking videos because we do eat a lot of apple bread. It's just a quick bread, it's very easy, and it just makes for an easy snack or a quick breakfast. Into the KitchenAid mixer, I have the whisk attachment, which is what I prefer to use for this. I have oil, sugar, eggs in here, and then I am just using applesauce. And got the dry ingredients in there, and I use quite a bit of cinnamon, more than any recipe calls for that I've seen. And I am getting this into 2 loaf pans. I prefer to make a shorter loaf, just not as tall, and I split this up in between 2 glass baking loaf pans. While that's baking, I am going to prep some dough to make an olive oil bread. This makes a lot. It uses, I think, over 6 cups of flour, and I used to make this all the time. When the kids were younger, I would make more pizzas with it, and it was just convenient because the dough stores in the refrigerator for a few days and I could just use smaller amounts. You add in part of the flour to start, mix that through, and then you add in the rest of the flour. I did modify the recipe. I do not use all-purpose flour for all of it. I replaced 2 cups with whole wheat flour. And I'm sure not all whole wheat flours are equivalent. This is one I pick up at Whole Foods. You can see here it is pretty sticky, and it is the darker color because of that whole wheat flour. And I will get that in the oven to proof once the oven is cooled down, because I just took out the apple bread. Here's how it looks. I do spray the pans pretty generously with avocado oil spray, and I let them cool down for a while, and then they tend to come out of the pan really well. Here's how it looks, and you can see how it's not a super tall loaf. The applesauce that I use is not sweetened, but it is fairly sweet usually, and I do add sugar, but I add less sugar than most quick breads would call for, so this is not overwhelmingly sweet. Here are a few more groceries that I picked up. This was from Aldi. Yeah, so I got a few grape tomatoes, cilantro, and blackberries. The dough has been proofing in the oven, and this is how it looks. It is pretty sticky along the sides, but it has definitely risen quite a bit. Got that punched down and put it into this glass bowl, and now I'll put it in the refrigerator, covered, but not sealed covered. This is later in that day, and I took out part of the dough and just really quick with my hands made a crust for a pizza. Had some pizza sauce. I like to keep that stocked in the pantry. We really like the pizza sauce from Whole Foods, the 365 store brand one. I forgot I had feta in the refrigerator, so I put that on half of this, and on the other half I'm going to just do mozzarella. This is mozzarella that I had in the freezer and defrosted, and I'm going to put a little bit on the feta side just to hold everything in place. I forgot to take video when it came out and it was still intact. When I moved it to the cutting board, it kind of broke apart, but that was okay. Here's how the crust looks. You can see I made this, it was fairly thick, but it is super soft and it has good flavor. It doesn't have that traditional pizza crust flavor though. If I want that, I definitely follow a pizza crust recipe. Into this pan I have shallots, the last couple shallots I think that I had, peppers that you saw, I bought those at the store this week, olive oil and seasoning, and then I'm going to add in this harissa pepper sauce. It is so delicious. I love this stuff. That's what this is going into the pan right now, and I am using that to make a shakshuka. I have a recipe that I'm looking at for the flavors, but I did not follow it closely at all. But the main thing is that you use the harissa to get the flavor that you want, and this sauce is delicious. Like, just the sauce on its own is wonderful. The harissa is expensive, just so you know. I get it at Whole Foods, but I have only bought it when it's on sale, and it's still like at least $6, I think, for this little glass jar. But you don't have to use it. There are other recipes I've seen online for shakshuka that do not use that. It's just really convenient to get a lot of flavor really easily. I put only 3 eggs in because I am not feeding a crowd, and covered that, let those cook. I do let them cook a little longer. Not everyone in my house is a fan of a runny yolk. And then I took more of that feta and crumbled that up and spread it over the top. Let that melt a little bit, and then took some of the cilantro that I had cleaned up and put that over the top as well. That fresh component adds a lot to this. I really like that flavor in here, but like I said, the sauce on its own is great. If you did not have fresh herbs, it would still be really good, and I'm a big fan of this. On this day, I want to make a loaf of bread, a small loaf of bread. So I got the dough out of the refrigerator, and this is how it looks. It is very sticky, and I am going to wear gloves just because I have really dry hands this time of year. I am putting a little olive oil on here, and that just really will help the dough not to stick. I don't put a lot of effort into shaping the dough. I am just generally trying to get it the size and then the height that I want. I preheated the Dutch oven, and I didn't put in the lid. I forgot to do that. So it was just the dish part that was preheated. And this is on parchment paper, and I'll be able to just put this into the pan. Get that pulled back a little bit. And then I decided to add a few drops of water. I don't know. I just thought it might be a little dry because it does need to bake for a while. Here's how it looks. And it turned out really well. The only issue was the bottom was a little hard, a little tough. So I don't know if I should have just pulled it out a few minutes earlier, or if I should maybe like add an extra layer of parchment underneath just so it's not sitting as close to the bottom of the Dutch oven. But here's how it looks inside. It was really good, and I like to have homemade bread with butter and jam. Actually, pretty much everyone in the house does. Trying something new, and I'm just going to preface this with it did not go great. I had picked up this Paneer Indian cheese at Costco a long while ago, and it needed to get used. I'd kind of forgotten about it because it got pushed to the back of the cheese drawer. Yeah, we have a cheese drawer. Anyway, I am going to make just a kind of lentil dish with a lot of sauce, and I thought I would add in the cheese. A quick Google search showed me some recipes that people either just add the paneer in as is or they fry it, and I thought I would try something new and I would fry this. I'm not really familiar with frying foods, at least in this much fat, but it fried up really well, but I think I over fried it. I think it got a little tough because of how long I cooked it. And I think next time I would not even bother with it. I would just add it into the dish, and I think it might absorb some of the flavor from the sauce. But I kept going. I was wrong. I still had shallot left, so I had chopped that up, got that in here with shredded carrot. I had a lot of baby carrots that needed to get used up, and this was too much carrot. It was a little too strong of a carrot flavor in this dish, and that's a recurring theme. I'm going to do it again later in this video, but I just kept going. Got this cooked with ginger and roasted garlic, a lot of spices, maybe more spices than some people would like, but I like a lot of flavor in these lentil dishes. This is a jar of tomatoes. I do keep a lot of tomato products in the pantry, so I have plenty of those to use during a pantry challenge. Got the lentils rinsed in here. These are little red lentils, and they cook pretty quickly. In this cast iron pan, I have pre-cooked brown rice, and I am reheating it with oil and a little bit of salt. The lentils have been cooking for quite a while. Well, not quite a while, but they've been cooking and they're getting soft. I went ahead and added in that cheese and cilantro. Here's how it's looking. It was a little too much sauce. I did not need quite this much. But you can see it does have definitely a very strong orange color to it, and that's because of all the carrot. At the end here, I added in frozen green peas and the rest of the cilantro. And this was good. It had a lot of flavor, but the texture on the cheese, it definitely was not quite the same as what I've had at restaurants. I did add in Greek yogurt at the end, and this is how it looks. I put it over the rice. It was very good. It had good flavor, but like I said, the cheese just wasn't ideal, but I'm going to keep experimenting with it. Now I'm making a staple in our house, mac and cheese. This is a recipe I found for the Instant Pot years and years ago. Probably one of the first recipes I found when we got an Instant Pot. And I'm using elbow noodles, which this was almost the last of the elbow noodles. I will definitely need to restock on those. The recipe does call for ground mustard, salt, and garlic salt. I also add in just garlic powder. I like a little more of that flavor. Water and butter. and got the noodles cooked in the Instant Pot with all those flavors. Now I'm adding in milk. I think the recipe calls for evaporated milk. I have used heavy cream, just whatever I have, but typically I'm just using 2% lactose-free milk. I have sharp cheddar cheese. This tends to be the flavor we like the best. I think the recipe also calls for maybe Colby Jack, but I usually have shredded sharp cheddar on hand, and that's primarily what I use along with Parmesan cheese. And I just eyeball this as far as the milk goes. You do have to add more than you might think because when it cools down, it will really thicken up. And it was delicious, just one of our favorite comfort foods. From that little loaf of bread I made, there were some edge pieces that were mostly crust and too small to fit in the toaster, so I went ahead and broke those up, put them into this enameled cast iron pan, and toasted them for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 minutes with olive oil and seasonings. Took those out of the pan, and I added in frozen spinach and frozen diced onions along with more seasoning, primarily this mushroom umami blend, salt, garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper, and then also a little bit of crushed red pepper. This is roasted garlic, and I don't know what to call this. I don't know. What's a frittata? I'm going to have to look that up. But anyway, this is an egg bake. I had roasted red peppers. Those are a pantry staple as well, and I got those out, diced them up, added them in. They just add a little brightness, I guess, in some of these dishes like this where it's a lot of heavier flavors. Got the eggs stirred in, adding more seasonings, and this is feta that I had in the freezer, and I'm sprinkling this over the top. And then I'm going to put this into the oven to finish cooking. And it did not take very long, maybe 10 minutes. I could have put it under the broiler to get a little more brown on the cheese, but I didn't even bother. And you can see here, it came out of the pan really well. I like this enameled cast iron. And here's how it looks. This was really delicious, had lots of flavor. Good way to use up frozen spinach too. I was looking forward to making something new on this day. I wanted to make lemon poppy seed muffins. And I've made them before, but I was trying a new recipe. I have milk here that I mixed up from a whole milk powder the day before. I have lemon powder that I order from Azure Standard, and I had lemon juice from the freezer. Unfortunately, the poppy seeds, I don't think they were good anymore. I have only used them a few times and they smelled a little off, like a lot of seeds. I'm sure they can go rancid, so I just erred on the side of caution and decided to not use them. But I already had all of this stuff out and I decided to just make a lemon muffin and not add the poppy seeds. And I will link the recipe below. For the lemon though, because I didn't have fresh lemons, I was just guessing on how much lemon juice and lemon powder to use. And it was good. It had lemon flavor. I would prefer an even stronger lemon flavor. I think I would add a little more lemon powder next time. And getting all the ingredients in here, getting them mixed up. I may have mixed this longer than I was supposed to, but here is how the batter looks. It looks a lot like a cake batter. It has sour cream in it, and that's the part that was the primary difference from the recipe I used before, just having more fat in it. And they were really full muffin cups. I was a little worried that they might overflow, but I only had these 2 muffin cup pans. If I had another one, I probably would have taken a little more of the batter out, but you can see here they didn't overflow the pan too much. I am going to also make a different muffin today, a banana nut muffin, which I don't think I've ever made because only 2 of us in the house like banana flavored things. But I wanted to go ahead and make these, and I'm going to put some of them in the freezer. And I had this banana. I'm just going to tell you right now, this would have been better if the banana was a little more ripe and had a stronger flavor. The quantity of banana for this recipe was good. I am using my blueberry muffin recipe. I'm just modifying it. So instead of adding maple syrup, cinnamon, and blueberries, I am adding in finely chopped walnuts and the banana. Getting this mixed up and into the baking pans. They had cooled down some. They still had some warmth, so I wasn't sure if that was going to make them a little too brown on the bottom. But while those are baking, I'm going to show you the lemon muffins. They smell good. You could smell the lemon. They're a little funny shaped on top, but nothing too bad. And they came off of the paper pretty well. And here's how it looks. I think it has a bit of a darker yellow color maybe because of that lemon powder. I have not used the lemon powder. I think I've only used it once. It's definitely one of those pantry items I need to try to use more frequently. But anyway, I decided to put a glaze on top and I made it way too thin, so I decided to dip these in and they were really good. I would probably add a little more lemon flavor next time. Here are the banana muffins. I don't know why one pan looks so much darker than the other, but they baked really well. The amount of batter was really good for the size of the muffin cups. They stuck a little more on the paper wherever there was a piece of banana, but overall, they came off the paper pretty well. Here's how it looks. I think next time I may toast the walnuts before I add them in to see if that gives a little more of a strong walnut flavor. You could use black walnuts. That's something I grew up eating, but they are a much more intense flavor. That's just a personal preference. And I may sprinkle a little brown sugar on the batter next time before they go in the oven. I am going to make a mushroom lentil loaf. I do have a recipe I'm following loosely, but I'm not sure if it's available online. I know there are many recipes online though for a vegetarian version of a meatloaf. Although the one I make is not quite vegetarian because the Worcestershire sauce that I use does have anchovies in it. You can get vegan or vegetarian versions of Worcestershire sauce though. In the food processor, I had already pre-cooked the lentils, so I got those in. Part of the lentils are in here, sorry. Salt, garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper. That's my own addition to this. There's also Worcestershire sauce, soy sauce, and dried thyme, and I added in celery seed because I didn't have fresh celery to add, and I know I don't because most people in my house don't like the texture of celery. There's also tomato paste in the food processor along with part of the oats. Here I am making a sauce to put on the top. It is a ketchup-based sauce, so I have ketchup, apple cider vinegar, Dijon mustard, and a little bit of sugar. And then on the stove, I'm cooking down frozen mushrooms, frozen onions, and fresh baby carrots that I chopped up. And once again, I added too much carrot to this recipe. That's what happens when you don't follow any measurements, but I wanted to use up what I had, so got those into the food processor with the other ingredients. You do not want this completely pureed, you just want it really well incorporated. And then I'm adding this mixture into a bowl with the rest of the oats, the lentils, and those ground almonds. Mixing that together really well, and then I'm going to put this onto a baking sheet that is lined with parchment paper. And I'll just use my hands to form it into a loaf shape. In the past, like when I first made it, I don't know in the recipe if it says the exact, I think it does, it gives dimensions. I maybe am making this a little thinner than what the recipe calls for. I just prefer more surface area for the ketchup mixture to be on. It is baked for part of the time, and then you put on the rest of the ketchup mixture over the top, put it back in the oven for a little bit longer, 10 to 15 minutes. And as a side, I had a bag of frozen green beans that I am frying with garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper, and salt. Here is the finished veggie loaf, and it looks really good. I really like having that glaze on the top. It adds so much flavor. And then the lentils, because you use that food processor to really incorporate some of it, I don't know, it holds together very well no matter how I kind of change up the base ingredients. Here's how it looks on the inside. It had really good flavor, and I am probably going to freeze part of this because it's quite a bit. But here you can see it's pretty orange. There's a lot of carrot in here, and you could definitely taste the carrot. So if you wanted to be able to taste more of the onion mushroom mix, I would definitely use less carrot. I'm ending this with just a little quick candy. I had these white melting wafers, which I always call it white chocolate, but they just call it white vanilla flavored melting wafers. But they were expired. I tasted one, still tasted fine, and I'm not giving this to other people, it's just for my family, so I went ahead and melted it in the microwave. Just doing that in short, like 30-second amounts of time, and just be aware the handles on a glass dish can get pretty hot from the microwave if you have to do it for, a minute and a half or so. I had taken the time to kind of separate the raisins so there weren't huge clumps, and then I just pour them right into the frosting or the candy melts and use a fork to put them onto parchment paper and let them set up on here. And that doesn't take very long at all for it to cool down. I had extra candy mixture, but instead of getting out more raisins, I'd already put them away. I just made little circles here on the left side of the chocolate or the vanilla candy melts. And here is how they look once they've cooled down. They pop right off of the parchment paper. And I think I do prefer to use actual chocolate melting wafers when I do raisins, but these were really good. And it looks like it's a little harder when I'm popping this apart, but really it's not. The candy melts do stay pretty soft, and they were very good. Just a nice little treat. Overall, I think it was a pretty good pantry challenge. It was definitely a lot easier than previous times because I was buying more produce. I mean, I didn't go crazy. I didn't buy all the things I would want, but I did really enjoy having more produce on hand during the challenge, and I think it helped me use up some things that I would have avoided if not. And I did take the time. I feel like I have a really good handle now on what's in the pantry, what needs to get used up sooner, and just what is there and what I should be restocking soon. And I will be spending extra money on my next few grocery trips to replenish. I don't save a lot of money with Pantry Challenge, but I am definitely avoiding spending as much. As always, thank you so much for watching.